can't beat 'em, then you pop 'em. You can't man 'em, then you mop 'em. You can't stand 'em, then you drop 'em. You pop 'em, 'cause we pop 'em like over red and vodka. C3, okay, a millionaire. I'm a young money millionaire.
All right, welcome back. Got my colleague Matt Aggie with me today. Thanks everybody for tuning in to Monday Morning Mining. We're running a little behind today, but we do have a little announcement here at the end of the show of a special that we're going to be doing tomorrow with some folks from the mining industry. So super excited about that. Matt, great to see you back from the holidays. And, as I was just explaining to you earlier, what would a holiday be without having, your kids go back to school and bring you home some treats in the form of type of bug. So, but no, yeah, things are great. Glad to be in 2026. And I think there's a lot of good stuff for us to cover today.
Yeah, no, nice to be back in the new year. So happy New Year. I think this is the first show that we're doing in the new year. And yeah, I guess we weren't on last week, but Bitcoin had its 17th birthday on January 3rd. So happy Bitcoin 17-year-old.
Yeah, absolutely. With that, let's dive right in. It's been a wild market. It's been an interesting market, and across all different markets, not just the Bitcoin market, if you will. And one of the big headlines was around difficulty adjustment and what's been going on there.
Yeah, let's pull up some visuals here for the audience and see if it comes up on your end. But yeah, so I guess just a quick recap. The network is still chugging along. We're block height 932,008. And we're well into the 5% era for Bitcoin. So over 95% of the supply has been issued. And back in November, right, we had some all-time high hash rate, all-time low hash price, and we've seen some relief since then. So the big news of the day overnight was like a 1% reduction in the network difficulty. And it's been about a 6% reduction in network difficulty since November. So we're seeing some relief for the miners, and today we can see some of their stock prices recovering, and some stocks like Iron and Cypher doing quite well today on some of the news over the weekend. So yeah, that's the story. Network's chugging along as always.
Right.
Yeah, 5% left remaining of the supply, and difficulties getting a little bit of relief for the miners out there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And with regards to the difficulty. For those, that aren't familiar, I mean, what does that mean for the average miner? How does that play into what they're doing? Things like that.
Yeah. So, it's how difficult is it for you to win a block with your hash rate? You'll need ever more hash rate as difficulty increases. As more miners come online, the difficulty goes up based on how much hash rate's on the network. So that means we've seen some hash rate actually coming down a little bit. So we've seen some miners turn off their machines, on average trending down since about November of last year. And probably that's a factor of the economics, as the price has not really cooperated.
Right.
And the hash price has been, at all-time low since October. Again, some relief since then, but it's basically miners turning off and difficulty adjusting down as that happens.
No, I mean, it's, I think that's kind of nature of the beast. It's one of those things where miners after a certain point, they're not able to, if you're not profitable, you're not going to keep your machines running. So, how does that look longer term? I mean, what will we see with the difficulty? What do you think we're going to see longer term in 2026? Or you think we're going to continue to see this downward, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because, you just can't guess what's going to happen with the Bitcoin price. And, there's all kinds of different opinions about 2026, the end of the 4-year cycle. And, revisiting all-time highs to, crashing down to the
Arthur Hayes said we're 200 grand is the magic number. So
yeah, it could be, right? And then there's some folks out there calling for 50K. So it kind of really depends. And a lot of miners, we'll probably touch on this later, they're actively seeking different strategies to monetize either their Bitcoin that they're holding, to raise capital, or some other ways to raise revenue, to pivot to HPC and AI, where their margins are 3 to 5x, better than mining Bitcoin. So that's a common theme as well.
Right.
It kind of depends on, this competition of capital, and are people investing in miners to bring online? Or are they investing in AI, HPC infrastructure, compute, or power?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because here in Illinois, like something, I know we're going to talk about this a little more, but once we get to that BlackRock piece, but something that has been hot, a hot topic here has been the entire, electrical consumption going on. And, Illinois, we have, I forget how many power plants, nuclear. I mean, I think some of the most in the country. But that said, they also want to offboard some of these older legacy coal-fired power plants. The problem is the amount of demand for electricity with all the data centers now it's just gotten, it continues to increase exponentially. And all of that said, I don't think this is just a tech cycle. I don't think this is just where, this is just going to poof and blow up, and you're not going to have this anymore. What does that mean? What does that mean for Bitcoin miners and those that need that power, you think?
It's an interesting question, and it's actually a really good segue to the next topic.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. But so BlackRock Investment Institute came out with their 2026 global outlook, excuse me. And in it, it's got a broad range of topics, but in it, they've got a section on AI build out facing constraints. And you can take away, what does that mean for Bitcoin miners? But the key number that they put out was, I think AI data centers, excluding any Bitcoin or cryptocurrency miners, today is about 5 or 6% of U.S. electricity demand. And they forecast by 2030 that may go up to 25%, so almost a quarter of it. And so there's some key implications there. I mean, you mentioned some, right? So it becomes this bottleneck of real world infrastructure and build out and capital to make that happen. But then, what does that do for Bitcoin miners? For me, I think there's probably going to be a 50-50 split between companies still focusing on Bitcoin as a load balancing technology, and of course the core value proposition of Bitcoin itself, but chasing those margins from AI and HPC as the hype and as the wave and the build out continues, because that's where the margins are better.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin will probably still chase, the free, wasted energy. There's a lot of the stuff that we've talked about with flare gas mining or renewables, or wherever that makes sense to do, where capacity needs to be overbuilt. So I think actually it's quite a symbiotic kind of relationship between the two. And you may even see, as the build out on the AI data center front goes, partnering that with the Bitcoin for load balancing, demand response technology to make sure everything's done more efficiently. So that's kind of my view. What do you think?
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, in Illinois, it's very political. I don't know that it's really about the environment. I think it's very political. It's very, which side are you on? And, there's no question that we need more power in Illinois, but we're also building a lot of data centers. Like, for example, I used to work downtown here in Chicago at the Board of Trade. And so the Board of Trade had 2 buildings. They're actually taking one of the buildings, and ComEd took it over, and they're building out a substation because of all like the infrastructure downtown that they need to power. And then, you go northwest into Northwest Illinois, outside Chicago, or, suburbs northwest of Chicago, you're seeing a lot of data centers being built out there where they've like piped in, new infrastructure just for that. So, I mean, it's one of those things like, yes, for the environment, it's important eventually to sunset that. But at the same time, how are you going to meet that increased demand? And I think before you go and just turn off, generation of power, even if you don't, if you don't think you are going to use it all, et cetera, you still should have the ability, if you need to spin it up, you should. Because the other problem is, like, Illinois is part of, like, their power grid ties into PJM, which sets the price for a multitude of states that are tied into that. Well, if that price keeps going up, someone's going to get squeezed out of this, because a lot of these power companies, they want the business from the data centers, because I mean, that's solid revenue for them. But then what happens with the residents? And there's been a lot of complaints about it. So, I guess when I look at all of this, at what's going on, I mean, it's kind of ballooned very fast, because if you go back to the 90s, when computers were just like coming on the scene, being things at home and outside of like an Apple IIe and things like that. I mean, you're consuming a lot of power. And, the thing with power, though, is if it's not used, what happens to it?
Yeah.
It's done. Like, and so there's been this thing in Illinois of like, well, let's create batteries to hold the power. And it's like, I mean, theoretically, how would that work? And, things like that. But
yeah, I mean, the competition, I guess, with Bitcoin, the same talking points have been around for a long time about squeezing out the consumer, pricing out consumers. But, we've seen in Texas a success story and the ability to actually, turn off Bitcoin miners. But with AI workloads, they're not as flexible, because a customer wants to be able to generate their cat picture or generate whatever meme or put somebody in a bikini 24/7. And, they're going to want that on. So
yep.
That's why I think partnering the two different kinds of workloads with AI data centers makes sense, to be able to do what you're saying, basically manage the demand, throttle when they need to make sure that residents, aren't in the dark because of AI.
No, I mean, 100% agree with you on that. And I think that from what I've seen with the AI stuff in the data centers, I mean, net, like, I think longer term we will have the capacity. I don't think we're going to get to that point where we don't. And if we do, I think the companies are going to do the necessary things to get, the proper infrastructure in place. But I mean, I guess the long story short out of the BlackRock report was, they don't see AI as being like a bubble as much. They see it as being like, this is a kind of a new frontier, and it's going to need all this power. Yes, it's going to disrupt other things in the business, but I think that happens irregardless. Like, because any new technology, like, it's crazy to think how fast AI came on the scene. Like, literally, like, so OpenAI launched, and then next thing you know, everybody was behind, like, was doing it. And so, I think you can have the best of both worlds, though, if you're a miner. Like, I do think you can get the benefit of the AI component where you're making some money, which can offset that component of the Bitcoin mining part. In markets where they're underwater, as it relates to the price it costs them to mine each coin.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's super interesting, and it blends all these different themes that are out there, like geopolitics between the U.S. and China, and competition on power, and national security. AI, who's going to win the race, and so but you can't do that without private capital. And you've seen all the money that's being thrown around and investments being kind of shared between these big firms. So it's kind of an interesting space to watch.
Yeah, I mean, to your point about capital, that actually goes to the next item of, like, with Riot. I mean, so they mined in December roughly 460 BTC. They sold roughly 1,800 BTC. Right now, they hold about 18,000 BTC.
Mm.
I mean, those are pretty sizable numbers. And, this whole mantra, this is where I think the problem is with a lot of the mining is how do they make money? If the pool that they're going after is constantly shrinking, how do they make money? And that's where I think the whole AI component comes in. You stick to supporting Bitcoin at your core, but yet then you also, to offset your operational costs, you're saying, okay, I'll also do AI, through the infrastructure that I'm able to. I mean, to me, I think that makes sense. Why put yourself, why keep digging a hole?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, no, this is just yet another example of incorporating AI, or call it a pivot to AI HPC. But you're right. It's of course still, one of the largest holders of Bitcoin. I guess 18,000 you mentioned. It's probably what, sixth or seventh largest. It's not. I don't have it off the top of my head, but they still hold a lot of Bitcoin. But historically, miners always sold their Bitcoin to fund their operations and expansion, and now they're just doing it to fund something other than Bitcoin expansion. But they, still focused on mining, now adding that component, selling Bitcoin to generate the revenue to fund it. So I guess when they look at it, that's probably the best option that they had.
Right.
So yeah.
Right behind them is like the CleanSpark stuff. You got CleanSpark. They mined 622, which actually is more than Riot. But they're also focused heavily on the AI data center component as well. So like all of them are kind of shifting to have these multiple revenue streams. I mean, if I was an investor looking at this saying, how do I hedge my risk? If I'm saying, hey, just focus 100% purely on Bitcoin, I get it, but then I don't, because it's like, okay, our profits are basically going to be out the window.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think what was it? Bitfarms, right, was in the news too, because they've sold off now their Paraguay site.
yeah,
if I understand that correctly, it was also to fund some North American focused AI infrastructure. So yeah.
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this all shakes out. And that said, we did a quick episode today. Matt and I just wanted to come on and kind of talk what we're seeing in the market, things that we can talk about today. But no, I mean, Matt, why don't you give a little overview? Tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be doing a special edition of Monday Morning Mining, focused on with two great folks from the Bitcoin mining space.
Yeah, so we had Nico Smith on the show a few weeks ago, before the end of 2025, and since then, he and Cindy Fang. So Nico's with Digital Mining Solutions, and Cindy is with BitcoinMiningstock.io, and they've jointly released a report. It's a Bitcoin Mining 2025 review. So a lot of the things that we've talked about today, they've done a comprehensive report across a number of different sections. Bitcoin mining fundamentals, as well as public Bitcoin miner kind of analysis, and a lot of the companies that we've talked about, moves that they're making, as well as their kind of equity performance, as well as Bitcoin Treasury. So they're going to come on the show tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern, and review their 2025 year in review, and we'll even try to talk to them about what their expectations are going forward. So we really look forward to that, having Nico back on the show and adding Cindy to talk about some of the public mining space.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be great, because then we can get some, I call it boots on the ground perspective of things. Whereas I'm not in the mining space on a day-to-day anymore. We just, obviously all the companies we work with, quite a few of them are, but it's always good to hear really what's going on behind the scenes and at the actual companies. So, wild week ahead. We got a lot of stuff going on in DC. We got, they're doing the Clarity. They're working on the Clarity Act in DC. We'll see where that goes. I don't know. Maybe we'll have some clarity. Maybe not. No pun intended there. But other than that, yeah, as Matt said, tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern, we'll be doing a special Monday morning mining, and then next week, 11 a.m. Central, we'll be bringing on a guest who I've known for many years, and he does consulting for the mining space. He's built sites in Russia, or northern Russia, in Asia, the U.S. So, and I think every one of them has their own different story, because they're all unique experiences. So, that all said, let's we'll wrap it up here, and then you can catch us, as I said, tomorrow night, 6 p.m. Eastern. We'll be sending out a link for that, and look forward to seeing everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean.
Awesome. All right, everybody have a great week, and thanks again.